Imagine this for a second. You're out on a quiet morning walk, coffee still warm in your system, birds doing their thing, the whole world feeling pleasantly ordinary. To anyone watching, it looks like nothing. Just a person taking a walk. But underneath your skin, something far more dramatic is unfolding. A silent, microscopic battle has kicked off, and the target is the most dangerous fat in your entire body. That deep, hidden, visceral fat wrapped snugly around your liver, your pancreas, your intestines is suddenly on notice. And that raises a question almost nobody can actually answer. At what precise moment does your body stop coasting and finally start torching that belly fat? Is it instant, the second your foot leaves the ground? Does it kick in at the half-hour mark? Does power walling until you're drenched in sweat speed it up? Millions of people walk every single day with zero idea of what's actually happening inside them. So today we're going to map it out, minute by minute, all the way down to the molecules. By the end, you'll know exactly when the fire starts. Here's the first thing to understand. Your body is, frankly, a control freak when it comes to energy. It does not waste a single drop of fuel, and it spends in a strict, predictable order. Picture a tight-fisted household budget. Before anyone touches the savings account, they raid the loose change in the kitchen drawer. Your body works the same way. The instant you start moving, your leg muscles fire off an urgent request for fuel. But they don't go straight for your fat reserves. Instead, they grab the loose change first, a fast-access carbohydrate called glycogen stashed inside your muscles and your liver. Glycogen is essentially glucose molecules linked together in long, branching chains, ready to be ripped apart at a moment's notice. Each one gets converted into ATP, the tiny rechargeable battery that powers every flex, every stride, every heartbeat. For roughly the first 5 to 7 minutes of walking, your body runs almost entirely on this glycogen. Your pulse climbs, your breathing gets deeper, and you might feel a strange little lift in your mood. That's not poetry. That's chemistry. Your nervous system is releasing adrenaline and its cousin noradrenaline, gearing you up for sustained effort. During this opening stretch, your visceral fat is basically asleep at the wheel. It hasn't even registered that you've started moving. The savings account is locked, and your body sees no reason to open it yet. Now we hit the first real turning point. Somewhere around the 7 to 10 minute mark of steady, continuous walking, the chemistry of your bloodstream begins to tilt. The key player here is a hormone you've definitely heard of: insulin. Think of insulin as a heavy padlock clamped onto your fat cells. When insulin levels are high, that padlock holds firm and your fat stays sealed inside. But as your working muscles keep pulling sugar out of your blood, your insulin levels start to slide downward. The padlock loosens, and right on cue, the counterweight to insulin steps onto the stage, a hormone called glucagon. If insulin is the lock, glucagon is the key that springs it open. Released by your pancreas, glucagon delivers the first genuine order for your fat cells to unload their cargo. But an order isn't enough on its own. You need a worker to carry it out, and that worker is an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase. Picture it as a tiny crew with cutting tools stationed inside each fat cell. Its job is to slice bulky stored fat, technically triglycerides, into smaller, more mobile pieces called free fatty acids. Once liberated, those fatty acids slip out of the fat cell and hitch a ride through your bloodstream, latching onto a transport protein called albumin, like passengers boarding a ferry. This whole process has a name: lipolysis, the breakdown and release of stored fat. The fatty acids ride the bloodstream straight toward your hungry muscles. So when does this really shift into high gear? Right around the 15 to 20 minute window. This is the moment everything's been building toward, the genuine tipping point. Your body quietly flips its main fuel source from sugar over to fat. Inside your muscle cells, the mitochondria, those microscopic powerhouses that act like high-performance engines, start hungrily pulling in those circulating fatty acids and setting them ablaze for energy. And here's the part that should make you sit up. Your visceral fat is first in line to be burned. Not the soft layer under your skin on your arms or hips, but the deep, dangerous fat hugging your organs. Why does the body play favorites like this? It comes down to wiring. Visceral fat is studded with a far higher density of beta-adrenergic receptors, the docking ports that catch adrenaline's signal, than the fat sitting just beneath your skin. In a sense, visceral fat has a high-speed connection straight to your nervous system, while subcutaneous fat is stuck on a slow, sluggish line. Because it's so metabolically reactive, visceral fat is genuinely the most harmful fat you can carry, linked to heart disease, insulin resistance, and chronic inflammation. But that same reactivity is exactly why it's the first to go when you exercise. This is why so many people notice their waistband loosening before the bathroom scale gives them any credit. The dangerous fat shrinks first. It's a quiet, invisible win for your long-term health that the scale completely fails to capture. Keep walking and you cross the 20-minute line. Fat release is now humming along, but there's another major character who hasn't been introduced yet, and it might be the most important of all. It's an enzyme called AMPK, short for AMP-activated protein kinase. The Scottish biochemist Graham Hardy spent decades uncovering how it works, and the simplest way to picture it is as your cell's low-fuel alarm. When your cellular energy charge starts dropping, AMPK trips the alarm and throws every available switch to bring more fuel online. Critically, it shuts down a molecule called malonyl-CoA. That molecule normally acts as a gate, blocking fatty acids from entering the mitochondria through a doorway called the carnitine shuttle, or CPT1. With malonyl-CoA suppressed, that gate swings wide open, and fatty acids pour into the mitochondria to be incinerated. Between roughly 20 and 30 minutes, this AMPK-driven mechanism is running at full tilt, and your fat burning is peaking. At the same time, something else remarkable happens on the surface of your muscle cells. Special transporter proteins called GLUT4 rise up from inside the cell and plant themselves on the outer membrane, where they start vacuuming glucose out of your blood. The astonishing part is that exercise summons them without needing insulin at all. Walking opens a separate insulin-independent channel for clearing blood sugar. For anyone living with prediabetes or insulin resistance, this is enormous news. A simple 10 to 15-minute walk after a meal can blunt the post-meal blood sugar spike more effectively than almost any other quick habit you could adopt. Now let's settle the question everyone argues about. How fast should you actually walk? The instinct is to assume that more sweat equals more fat lost. But here's the twist. Charging along like you're late for a train can actually undercut your visceral fat results. There's a sweet spot, and it sits at roughly 55 to 75% of your maximum heart rate. Inside that zone, oxygen reaches your muscles freely, which lets fatty acids be fully oxidized, completely broken down into usable energy. Push too hard, start gasping, and your body flips into anaerobic mode, leaning back on sugar for quick power. You might burn more total calories in that frantic state, but the share of those calories coming specifically from fat drops sharply. The reliable rule of thumb is this: walk briskly enough that holding a conversation feels slightly effortful, but not so hard that you couldn't speak in full sentences. Breathless means you've overshot the fat-burning zone. Let's tackle some stubborn myths while we're here. First, fasted cardio. Walking before breakfast to maximize fat loss sounds airtight on paper. Your insulin is at rock bottom, so the fat locks are already open. And yes, you'll tap into fat earlier. But the research strongly suggests it's oversold. With your glycogen tank low, you tire out faster, and in a deeper deficit, your body can start breaking down precious muscle tissue for fuel. When researchers measure total fat burned across a full 24-hour period, the difference between eating first and fasting comes out essentially even. Your body balances the books over the whole day, not in that single window. Second myth, that a walk only counts if it's 30 unbroken minutes. Completely false, and great news for busy people. Splitting your movement into 3 separate 10-minute walks across the day delivers comparable benefits for your heart and your waistline. Movement is movement. Your fat cells don't check a stopwatch to see whether your minutes came in 1 block or 3. But let's be honest about the bigger picture. Visceral fat won't evaporate after a single inspired weekend of strolling. Real change takes around 4 to 8 weeks of consistent walking to nudge your body into genuine metabolic remodeling. And here's something worth knowing about the long game. Regular walking triggers a process called mitochondrial biogenesis, governed by a master regulator with the clunky name PGC1 alpha. In plain terms, your cells start building more mitochondria, which means more engines burning more fuel even when you're sitting still. Over weeks, your resting metabolism quietly upgrades itself. And the burning doesn't stop the moment you sit down. After a brisk walk, your body keeps consuming extra oxygen for a stretch as it restocks glycogen, clears metabolic byproducts, and resets your system to baseline. Scientists call this excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC, sometimes nicknamed the afterburn. It's modest after a walk compared to all-out sprinting, but it means your elevated fat burning lingers gently into the minutes and hours after you've finished. There's also a quieter hero worth a mention, NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's all the energy you burn fidgeting, standing, taking the stairs, pacing while you're on a phone call. Walking trains you to move more in general, and that accumulated low-grade movement can quietly outweigh a single formal workout over the course of a week. What if you push past 45 minutes? Your body leans even harder on fat stores, which sounds ideal. But keep an eye on cortisol, your stress hormone. Cortisol rises to keep your energy mobilized, and that's fine in moderation. Walk for 2 solid hours with no fuel on board, though, and elevated cortisol can begin chipping away at muscle for emergency energy. For maximum visceral fat loss while protecting your hard-won muscle, the realistic target is 30 to 60 minutes of brisk walking. A quick and genuine note: if you have a heart condition or serious joint problems, check with your doctor before ramping up. For nearly everyone else, walking remains the cheapest, safest, most accessible fat-burning tool on the planet. So let's pull the timeline back together. From 0 to 7 minutes, you're warming up and burning mostly sugar. From 7 to 10 minutes, insulin falls, glucagon rises, and the fat release crew clocks in. From 15 to 20 minutes, AMPK fires up and fatty acids flood into the mitochondria, and the furnace truly lights. From 20 to 30 minutes, you're at peak burn. That exact moment you were wondering about at the start, it lands right around the 15 to 20 minute mark. And here's one last thing that almost nobody knows. When you burn that fat, where does it actually go? It doesn't melt or sweat out. As researchers Ruben Meerman and Andrew Brown demonstrated, the overwhelming majority of fat you lose literally leaves your body as carbon dioxide, breathed out through your lungs. You quite literally exhale your belly fat, breath by breath, step by step. But the single most important takeaway isn't about any one walk. It's the slow, compounding upgrade to your entire metabolic engine. Over weeks, your mitochondria multiply, your insulin sensitivity climbs, your chronic inflammation cools down. Your body was built by millions of years of evolution to move constantly, and somewhere along the way, we forgot how to use that ancient programming. Every single step is a quiet signal that you're alive, awake, and rebuilding your health from the inside out. If this changed how you see your daily walk, send it to that one friend who insists walking doesn't count as real exercise. Let's get them moving too. And if you want more science explained without the hype, stick around. Your body is extraordinary. Give it a reason to walk.